Tonight, I want to slow this story down because what's emerging from the latest Epstein file releases is not internet speculation and it is not rumor. It is something far more serious. Written statements from federal prosecutors themselves. Recently released internal correspondence includes a letter stating that prosecutors identified 10 co-conspirators connected to the sex trafficking operation run by Jeffrey Epstein and his longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be very precise here because precision matters. This letter does not say suspects. It does not say persons of interest. It explicitly uses the term co-conspirators, a term prosecutors do not use casually. According to the letter, subpoenas were served in multiple states, victims were being interviewed, an FBI hotline was activated, investigators were actively attempting to locate individuals described as part of the criminal conspiracy. That language alone raises a fundamental legal question. If federal prosecutors put in writing that 10 co-conspirators exist, why were none of them charged? To understand why this matters, you need to understand how prosecutors work. Career federal prosecutors are extraordinarily careful with terminology. When they label someone a co-conspirator, it means they believe there is sufficient evidence that the person knowingly participated in a criminal conspiracy. That conclusion is not reached lightly, and it is not reached without evidence. At that point, prosecutors generally have three options: indict the individual, flip the individual as a cooperating witness, or grant immunity in exchange for testimony. What prosecutors cannot do, at least not without undermining their own case, is simply acknowledge co-conspirators in writing and then do nothing. And yet, that appears to be exactly what happened here. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. That conviction was based on a conspiracy that by definition involves more than one person. So again, the question must be asked, where are the others? Now contrast this with public statements made later by senior officials, including testimony claiming there was no credible evidence of Epstein trafficking victims to anyone other than himself and Maxwell. Those two positions cannot both be true. Either prosecutors had enough evidence to label 10 individuals as co-conspirators, or they did not. Either the files contained evidence justifying further charges, or they did not. What does not pass any reasonable test is the idea that career prosecutors concluded co-conspirators existed, documented it internally, pursued subpoenas and interviews, and then simply discovered there was nothing there. That is not how federal criminal investigations work. This discrepancy raises serious concerns about institutional accountability, not internet conspiracy, and it raises another issue that deserves attention: credibility in court. If prosecutors believed one of these alleged co-conspirators testified at Maxwell's trial, they would have been legally required to disclose that person's unresolved criminal liability to the defense. Otherwise, the jury would be misled about the witness's motives, especially if that witness avoided prosecution by cooperating. Failing to resolve the culpability of co-conspirators doesn't just raise ethical issues, it can destroy cases. It opens the door to mistrials. It weakens convictions, and it undermines public trust. That is why prosecutors typically resolve co-conspirator liability before or during major trials, not after and not never. Now we reach the most troubling part. If senior officials later testified to Congress that no co-conspirators existed despite internal documents stating otherwise, that raises the possibility of false statements to Congress, a federal offense under U.S. law. Lying to Congress does not require testimony to be under oath. It only requires that the statement be knowingly false and material. And beyond that, if misinformation was used to shield individuals from investigation or prosecution, it raises the specter of obstruction of justice. Let me be clear, I am not accusing anyone of crimes here, but I am saying this, and this is important. These contradictions demand explanation. They demand transparency. They demand accountability, and they demand serious oversight, not social media outrage. The Epstein case was never just about one man. It was about how wealth, power, and influence can distort justice, and whether our institutions are willing to confront that distortion when it matters. If co-conspirators existed, they deserve accountability. If they did not, the public deserves an explanation for why prosecutors said they did. Anything less is not justice. It is avoidance. And avoidance in a democracy is how trust collapses. We will continue to follow this story carefully, separating evidence from speculation and accountability from performance. Thank you for watching.